Hello, everybody. It's my great pleasure to announce our next talk about NFTs or non-fungible token. I just wanted to say NFTs are broken. I think I got it totally wrong. It's rather non-functioning token, maybe. We will see. So, if not done already, now it's the time to put NFTs on the list of your buzzwords next to, I don't know, machine learning, artificial intelligence, blockchain. And our speaker is Andreas Greimel, a former team colleague and friend of mine, but nowadays he's addressed as co-founder and CTO of Mint Garden. And in this startup, he's developing a novel trading platform for NFTs in the Chia blockchain ecosystem. His mission is to, I have to read it, I'm sorry, is to improve the concept of NFTs as they can be observed in other blockchain ecosystems and create true utility around the technology. You can see I have no idea what it means, but I'm really looking forward to finding out together with you in this talk. If after the talk you still have no idea what NFTs is all about, but you still want to converse with Andy, you can try talking about kits or portafilter espresso machines, so Siebträgermaschinen. Yeah, if you have questions during the talk, please feel free to ask them right away. For all of you watching remote, please post your questions in the Slack channel, and yeah, we will ask them Andy after the talk. Okay, Andy, have fun. No, wait. Audience, have fun listening to Andy and his inspiring talk about why NFTs are broken and, of course, how to fix them.
Yeah, welcome everybody at the Big Tech Day. I think we have already seen two very inspiring talks wherever you've been in the last couple hours. And today I want to talk to you about NFTs. And I mean, NFTs is something that you hear about a lot in the media, mostly related to some cartoon apes or something like that, and people that sell them for prices that are like enough to pay for a house. But sometimes it's unclear what NFTs are actually doing, what they are and what they aren't. And in my talk, I want to touch a little bit on how NFTs are built on existing ecosystems, what they can and cannot do, and how to improve some of the things. So we're not gonna fix everything. It's just too much to fix, but we're looking at some things that can be improved. So quick agenda, we're talking about what are NFTs and how are they actually implemented, not on a code level, but on a conceptual level. We're gonna talk about what the issues are with how NFTs are done right now. And we're looking at some ways of improving these NFTs. So first, we have to talk about the concept of fungible and non-fungible. Since it's part of the name, it's kind of a big part of it. So fungibility means, and it's not something that comes out from the cryptosphere, it's something that exists in the real world as well, is if you can replace one thing for another and have the same meaning, basically. So you can take $1 and you can take another dollar, and actually you don't care about which one you get. It's the same amount, and you can just exchange it with somebody else, and nothing changes for you regarding the value or what you actually own. I mean, it's in the real world, basically everything is non-fungible because the two dollar bills are actually not the same. But especially in a digital world, fungibility means that you can just replace it with something else, and it means the same. It's also the same with a Bitcoin. So if you have a Bitcoin, you don't care about this or that Bitcoin. It works the same. But on the other side, non-fungibility means that it's not interchangeable, not replaceable by something else. So for example, real estate is a very typical example. Each house, each building is a different thing, and you cannot just say, okay, this thing and that thing are interchangeable, and you can just swap it, and then both sides will be happy. That's most of the time that's not the case, and therefore we have a non-fungible object. Same with art pieces. An art piece is a unique thing, And you cannot say, okay, this thing is interchangeable with some other thing. And a theater ticket, for example, a cinema ticket is the same. If you have like a specific seat that you've reserved, it also means that it's not interchangeable with something else, just because there's only one person that is able to sit in that seat. And the same idea is working for tokens on a blockchain. So that's basically just digital representations of value in some way or form. I also already had the Bitcoin on here. So the currencies are basically the fungible things. And you can also have like a digital US dollar that is also a fungible token. And non-fungible tokens would be like unique representations of, for example, art pieces or digital creations. So let me tell you about Vincent. Vincent is an artist, and Vincent creates art. For example, this art piece, some of you might know it. So the traditional artwork world works like that. You create an art piece, you sell it to somebody else, and it's not just that you sell it to make a living, to make more art pieces. There's also the aspect of having a history with each art piece. So each art piece is not only valued by the creator, but also by the people that owned it in its history. Meaning that if some fancy gallery owned your art piece, or if some art critic owned your art piece, it increases the value of this particular art piece, but also with for all the other art pieces that you create. And there's also this aspect that if you some time in the future will die, then your creations will be limited to the ones that you created while you're living. So Vincent here, he will most probably not create any more art in the future. So this also increases, like, or adds value to the things that he creates. And like there's of course the concept of digital art. So Vincent could like create artworks on a computer. But the digital world is a little bit different in the regard that digital files or data in general is perfectly copyable. So nobody's gonna go into the museum and is able to copy the Starry Night's artwork like perfectly, and so like generating a perfect copy of that. It might be the case if you like invest a lot of effort, but in the digital world, you just right-click Save As, and you have the same thing. So for a person creating digital art, it's actually very hard to get some kind of a uniqueness component in there, some kind of rarity, some kind of like special notion of this is something special, because it's just like copyable. Most of the time you have like, I create something, I go to some shops, I create my own shop, I go to other shops, and I'm gonna sell my digital creations there, for example, for people to use it in their ads or use it in their media campaigns. And but most of the time creating digital art is mostly like a service that that other companies buy from you to say, okay, can you please create me a logo? Can you please create me an ad campaign? And it's not like you create an art piece and then you find somebody to buy it. That's still not something that is totally understood. It's also because it's very hard to say, okay, you are now the one that owns this art piece and everybody else does not. It's very hard to get that concept along. And it's also in a world where we have social media, where everything is shared across the globe all the time. It's hard to have like this uniqueness in there. So what about we're creating an NFT for these artworks that this artist wants to sell, maybe to fund his own work, maybe to give people something that they can actually show their gratitude to actually own a limited thing instead of like just having the same copy than everybody else. So it's basically to make a living as an artist. So an NFT is a token, and that's this thing on the left. and it lives on a blockchain. And I'm not going to talk about how blockchains work and what they do. We can just say it's a distributed ledger that a lot of people make sure that it's not manipulated afterwards, after things have been written to it. And in this case, we write a token like that onto the blockchain. It's a smart contract, and I'm going to leave that out for now. So what's actually inside an NFT is it has some kind of identifier. It's not something that you create, it's just there. There is an owner, so because without ownership of the token, it would actually not mean anything. But ownership is something that is very inherently baked into the blockchain concept, because every Bitcoin, for example, is also owned by somebody. And the third thing that is inside an NFT is some kind of reference. So a URL in this case that points to the artwork or to an image. And that's basically it. Okay, you have a transfer function that allows you to transfer the NFT to somebody else. But the NFT itself is just like a thing on the blockchain that is owned by somebody and points to somewhere else. And it's not restricted to images. It's basically, you can point it to anything. It's just like the very general purpose building block that you can build things with. And what has been popular in like the last year is pointing at images or some kind of digital creations. And this token lives through time, or is manipulated through time. For example, if you have an ownership transfer, the token exists in some point in time on the blockchain, has some owner, and after you change the owner, the record of the blockchain is going to be, there's going to be a new record added to the blockchain, which says, okay, the owner changed, it's now somebody else. But you can still go through the history of the blockchain and look at how it transformed over time. So you can look at the history of who owned what over time, and like figure out whether that is something you want to give value to or not. But that's basically how it moves through time. Very early, people noticed that pointing to an image is maybe not enough, because you might need some kind of metadata associated with that image to like give it a name or show who the artist is or give some kind of description. Or, for example, in the digital collectible sphere, there's a lot of use of attributes like the color and the sunglasses of the cartoon ape or things like that. And all these things have now been stored in an intermediate metadata file. So we are still restricted here to just having one URL in the NFT. So what people did is they just didn't point to an image directly, but to a text file, a JSON file in this case, which states, okay, the name of the thing you're pointing to is Starry Night, and it's like a painting of this and that side. And there's the image in there that actually references the data. So you now have like two indirections from the NFT to actually get to the data that is referenced. So that's nice. Now we have we can associate the name and things like that to our token, while being needing that second hop. But what happens if somebody replaces the data? Because I mean, the link is just like to my website. It's not like that's something that is immutable. So you can just go and say, okay, I have a new image here, and the person owning that NFT wasn't aware of the data changing in the future while they were buying it. So this is a problem that you kind of have to solve if you want to have immutable data. And what other ecosystems, or especially Ethereum ecosystem, did is they used the so-called IPFS, or interplanetary file system. It's basically a very fancy word for, it's a peer-to-peer network to share data. And the nice thing is that the data in the network is not referenced by an URL like this, but by the hash of the content, which is basically like a unique fingerprint of the file you're pointing to. So if you look at this NFT, it now doesn't have an HTTPS link, but an IPFS link, which means it points to the interplanetary file system. And the link is also not something that has a proper name, but instead it's a very cryptic number of characters, which is a unique representation of the data it points to. Which means that if you use the same link, you always get the same data. And it also means that nobody can change the data that this link points to without changing the link itself. So that helps to reference data that is actually should not change in the future. And you're using that for the metadata and for the data itself, the image in this case. But still, so that is basically the status quo on how NFTs are done on the big players of the ecosystem. It's on Ethereum, for example, you have the ERC 721 standard. That is basically the standard for NFTs. And it looks like this, and everybody uses it with IPFS, and everybody uses it with this intermediate metadata file. And it's also how OpenSea, for example, the very big marketplace for NFTs on Ethereum, how they figure out how this thing you're buying is called and what the history is, and what the image that it points to is. So now let's talk about some of the shortcomings of that. So one thing I want to talk about is, okay, what's about this reference data? What happened is, will that data be around? So data permanence is something that is actually pretty hard to do, and we're going to talk about that in the future. Also, what does owning this NFT actually mean? And who is the creator of that thing? Who proves to me that this is actually created by the one that pretends to be the creator? So we looked at this NFT before. It's with the metadata and with IPFS. But the issue with IPFS is that it's a peer-to-peer network, and if you want some data from the network, there has to be somebody else on the other side who gives you the data. And it's very easy to find this somebody because you have this very unique file path that you can use to actually find it. But there has to be somebody who actually owns the data and serves it to you if you need it. And this is an issue because what happens if this person or this entity is no longer there? What happens if somebody, or if all the people that served the data in the past stop serving it? I mean, there are services that you can buy, so-called pinning services. It's like you have a monthly fee and you pay it, and they will keep serving this data to the network, to anybody who needs it. But I mean, there's like small companies, they might just stop doing what they do. They might go bankrupt, they might do something else, and you cannot actually be sure that things are gonna be around in the future. And there are already NFTs that point to the void just because there's nobody there actually serving the data. So what we can do here is we first have to acknowledge, okay, we want to have immutable data. We don't want to, I mean, there is the idea of having NFTs that change over time, and that's fine. But for our art use case, we now want to say, okay, we want to have immutable data. But we have to acknowledge that hosting data for years and years in the future is a hard thing. Because, I mean, the S3 was not around 10 years ago, and will it be around in 10 years? We're not sure. And same with, you see it with the internet, how many websites from 20 years are still around? How many can you actually go to and like grab a file from there that was there 20 years ago? So we need kind of a way to change the place where the data is stored while keeping it immutable. And we do that by storing the hash, the fingerprint of the data on chain, like in the NFT, and also make the place where the data is stored updatable. So what that means is okay, we now made it way bigger, this NFT. First of all, we throw out the indirection with the metadata. We say, okay, let's just like have two links in the token. We say, okay, there's the data that is hosted here, and there's the metadata that is hosted somewhere else. And then you can like throw out the image down here, and you have this just as a metadata, and the image is still around. Also, we want to store the hash of the data and the metadata in the token, which means we can now make sure that anything these links point to, is that actually the right thing? Maybe it's like one of these links could go down. Okay, that's fine. But as long as there's like one link in the NFT that points to the right data, you can still have it working in the way that it was intended. And I mean, I didn't talk about it directly, but we want to have it updatable. But in the blockchain world, nothing is, you cannot remove things. You can only add things. There will always be a history of the past. So what we do is we don't store one URL, but instead we store a list of URLs. And we allow the owner of the NFT to actually add things to the NFT, add URLs to the NFT where the data is stored. And this means that if I buy an NFT and at the time I'm buying it, everything is fine, then I have it under control to actually ensure the data will be around in the future. So I can just add my own server here. I can add some other hosting mechanism. I can add this new storage technology that wasn't invented yet in the future and just make it work. And so that is one idea of how to increase the permanence of NFTs. We say we point to the same data, but we don't care about where it is hosted. The second thing I wanted to talk about is ownership. So first of all, one neat thing of blockchains is I can actually verify cryptographically that if I say I'm the owner of this NFT, you can prove it by some kind of cryptographic signing. You can actually prove that I own this NFT. But owning this NFT is actually nothing that you can buy things with or that you actually get any rights with. Just because you own a token that points to something doesn't mean that you have any rights to use that thing it points to. It's the same with, I don't know, the developers in here will know it. If you go on a GitHub repository, which is public, and there's no license in there, you're not allowed to do anything with it because the owner of the code didn't allow you to do it. And that's how copyright works. So, but you need some kind of agreement between the creator of the work and the owner of this NFT, for example, to actually give some rights to the owner. For example, to use it privately, commercially, in any way. So if Vincent here creates this NFT and sells it to some collector, what happens with the copyright? What happens with the Urheberrecht in German? And actually, nothing happens. He just keeps it. He just sold this token, but inherently, the token doesn't grant you any rights. So what you need is some kind of license that you, as the creator, provide to the owner that says, if you own this NFT, you get these and these and these rights, and you're allowed to do this, and you're not allowed to do that. And that's fine. That's how the copyright and license agreement stuff works. But you don't need a blockchain for that. You need some place, like on the website of the artist, where you host that license, and where people can go to and say, okay, I bought this NFT. What rights did I actually get by buying it? Okay, I have to find the creator, and I now look at the license that they provided. If they did, because there's a lot of projects that just didn't provide a license, and you're like, okay, what can I do now? I'm not owning anything. So that's a very hard thing to do, to actually find out what you buy when you buy an NFT. But it gets even worse if this person resells the NFT to even somebody else. Because then they, at least if you like acknowledge the NFT for what it is, it's like some kind of like ownership relation to the artwork, this person would lose the rights and this person would get them instead because they like transfer it over. And but this means that this license agreement has now to work between these two parties, which never met because, I mean, at least here it's some kind of like a primary sale, but that's a secondary sale on some kind of third-party market. So you're not aware of this transaction. So now this person has to find, okay, who is actually the creator and did they provide a license for that? And for the big projects, that might be something easy to find out, but for smaller artists, for example, that's a hard thing to do. So getting back to our new NFT concept, we just say, okay, let's just, I mean, we have links in there. Let's just add another link. And also use the same concept with the hash and the thing it points to. And we just like link the license. We link to what it means to own this NFT. And that's actually pretty neat because then you can just look at the NFT itself. And either you find the license in there, then you can go there and see, okay, this is what owning this NFT means. And it also means that the creator is not able to change it in the future. Because, I mean, technically they are not allowed if they grant you rights without time limitation, then they cannot take it back. But they can change the rights for future owners because they might not know that there was a different license agreement in the past. But in this case, that's not changeable. That's immutable. That license will be around not just for me, but also for my future for the future owner of that NFT. So that's on the other side. If you don't find a license in there, it's a kind of at least a yellow flag. It wouldn't say a red flag, but it's at least a yellow flag because you can actually not be sure what it is that you're actually buying when you buy this NFT. And one third thing I want to talk about is this kind of like, who is the creator? A lot of projects, or let's say the NFT sphere has a lot of speculation, hype, and things like that going on. And with that comes a lot of scams and fakes and things like that. People want to make quick money with other people's work. So they go to Divine Arts and just like grab the top artwork for the week and mint it as an NFT, and if people don't research what they are actually buying, they cannot be sure that this is actually the person that created this artwork. On the other side, you can actually have empty boxes. No, you can actually have two NFTs that point to the same data. Nothing restricts you from doing that. I mean, they will have different IDs. They can have different owners, but they can point to the same data. And even in our special big or the URLs are on chain kind of case, it's still possible to just like have two NFTs that point to the same data. And now you have to find out, okay, which one is actually the real one? Which one is the one that actually grants me rights in the future? Which actually grants me rights for this artwork? Because just because this NFT points to the same data, to the same license, doesn't mean that it means anything, because only the creator is able to grant these rights. So you need kind of you need a way to actually identify the creator of these artworks. And one way in the Ethereum world would be the creator has a website and they say, okay, this is my NFT, and this and this and this is also my NFT. But it's very tedious for people coming from the other side, from looking at the NFT, to find out who is the creator. And one idea of how to do that is to have a separate entity on chain, which is an identity, which is like the description. I mean, you could say it's another NFT. It points to different things. It's another NFT, and it is referenced in the other NFT. It says, okay, we call it DID, or decentralized identifiers. It's a standard that is coming up, and using the terms here. So this identity could do two things. I mean, it's connected to the NFT, so there's a direct relationship on-chain to the NFT and the identity. But what the identity can also do is you can create a link to the off-chain world, to things outside of the blockchain. And one way of doing that is, I don't know if anybody of you used Keybase in the past, they have this neat bi-directional verification process where you post something like this on Twitter, verify myself, I am this identifier. And on the other side, you post the proof of this, like the reference to this proof in this case, on the blockchain. So what that means is this identity points to Twitter, and Twitter uses the identifier to point back to it. And that means that if you look at the on-chain thing, you can look at, okay, what is the connected social media presence? And then I can go back from the social media presence to the identity. And this way, this is actually not fakeable. I mean, you could even add a cryptographic signature in there that signs this key that uses the token. You can even get even secure. But this is like a connection that says, okay, this creator of this token was able to make that tweet, which is most probably because they have control of that account, because it's theirs. And it helps people that want to buy NFTs a lot to actually figure out, okay, who is the owner of, now who is the creator of that NFT? Is it somebody who's faking it, or is it actually real? And I mean, yes, you need a lot of ecosystem around that to make people do that, because it's more work, you have to verify and things like that. And you have to have users that actually acknowledge the work that you invest to make things more transparent, more secure. But if you do that, then it helps a lot of people to make better decisions. So all of the things I just talked about are part of the NFT standard in the Chia ecosystem, which I'm also working on in this ecosystem, working on with my startup. And if you want to hear the details of why they came up with that standard and how it was developed, I highly recommend you to visit the talk after lunch in here, in this very room. It's by Matt Howard, who is one of the lead engineers behind that NFT topic on Chia, and he's gonna go a little bit more in the history of how they came up with these different ideas and how they actually work on Chia. It's not gonna be very technical, but it's gonna be very interesting to see why it came up like this. Because I can now just say it's a better way, but I'm just trying to build an ecosystem around that. And with that, we come to Mint Garden, which is an NFT platform, an NFT explorer, minting platform, marketplace. At least it will be in the future. But it's already live. You can go to mintgarden.io and look at what NFTs have been created in the Chia ecosystem. It's live, I think, since a week ago. I think it has been 2 weeks. But yeah, it's rather new and a lot of experimentation happening there. I mean, you see the same cartoon things going on there as in every other ecosystem, but at least the standard underneath it is very capable of doing a lot of really impactful things, like artwork that is actually verifiable, that is actually able to live out multiple years and still be around. And yeah, so that's what my mission at Mint Garden is going to be. So if you look at one individual NFT, you actually have like real identities behind that. You have a real license behind that. It would actually scream at you if it doesn't have a license. You can since this NFT is rather complicated, you need a very good viewing layer or explanation layer to actually make it easy for people to understand what's happening. And that's what we are trying to do here, is to, for example, have the history, something that people can really understand and say, okay, this actually created by this person. This is actually owned by this person. This has been, one thing I didn't talk about at all is royalties are baked into the NFT and they will be paid out even if you don't trade through an official marketplace that pays the royalties. You cannot trade it without paying royalties. It's baked in the NFT. And there's like a lot of different small pieces that just make it a very interesting standard to do, for example, digital creations and artworks with. And so yeah, that's the idea of Mint Garden, to use that very good standard and elevate it to something that people can very easily use to create digital representations or like digital scarcity, some kind of digital uniqueness, which is still a very mind-blowing concept from my perspective, being around in the digital world for a long time and saying everything always has been perfectly replicable. Everything could have, like, you can always take perfect copies of things. And it's very hard to actually prevent people from copying things. And having a mechanism to actually provide uniqueness, to actually provide some kind of scarcity, that's a very interesting thing. I don't think that we actually came up with the real interesting use cases yet. It's just the start. And so it's a very exciting time to be in that ecosystem. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much for your attention, for listening. If any questions, I expected some questions while I was talking, but I'm also going to take them at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andy, for this interesting talk. Let's jump right to the questions. Stefan?
Thank you for the talk. So I have a question about the legal implications of these licenses. You mentioned that the licenses are part of the NFTs, so they are somewhat less changeable. But as far as I understand, the legal system, a contract usually involves 2 or maybe more parties. So the person who resells it sells it to a third party, and that third party was not part of the initial contract. So is there still a way to make that work?
Basically, it works like open source licensing. It's kind of enough to have an MIT license inside your repository to allow everybody in the world to just find your repository and use it the way that the license specifies. So as long as the license specifies the owner of the NFT is granted these rights, I guess that's very, very similar to, for example, how open source licensing works.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Franz. Thanks for the talk. Very interesting, as I'm a newbie in NFT, and it cleared up my mind how it works. I have a question. What makes it impossible for the owner of a digital asset to upload my photo or my art 10,000 times and sell it 10,000 times as a unique art? I could do that, no?
It doesn't prevent you to do that, but it's very transparent because everybody can look at all the NFTs that have been created, and they can go through and say, okay, you claim to be selling a unique thing, and but there's another thing and another thing and another thing that points to the same data, and it's also created by you. So
yeah, but I could create different Twitter accounts and
you could,
go to different platforms.
But even then, it's still very transparent because especially like the tooling around it, there will be tooling around it, like I'm building. It's very simple to see as a community member to see that there are duplicates. I've seen another NFT project that just managed to create duplicate NFTs by mistake, and there were like a couple people to actually say, hey, this one is a duplicate and this one is also a duplicate. Is that intended or is it not intended? It was like one duplicate. And so that's the idea of having transparency through the blockchain to actually be able to figure that out.
I still don't get what NFTs actually bring to the table because the only thing compared to existing, let's say, authorities that basically keep track of who is the owner of something or not, for example, German GEMA for music, is that it's decentralized, but in in the end, I need a centralized authority to enforce my license. And basically, if I want to, if I have to commercial right to use some art, and somebody else uses this in an illegal way, I still need a state or a police to enforce that. So what is actually the thing that that NFT brings to the table? Yeah.
You're not cutting out the legal system. You're totally right. You still need somebody to enforce the rights that you actually claim to have by owning an NFT. What you cut out is the people selling your art to other people. You cut out, at least in my ideal world, you cut out the marketplaces that take a share of each sale. Because, I mean, it's still the case if you look at how NFTs are done in Ethereum. You have OpenSea and very big players. They take a very small royalty, I think that 2.5% or so from each transaction, but they take their share. And you have to go through them to actually make sales. But in my ideal world, you could say, I don't have to go through this and that marketplace. I can just like sell my art directly to people through, for example, social media, through the small community that I already formed. I can sell it to them. They can resell it, and there is some kind of record keeping who is actually the owner of that digital art piece right now. Because I mean, in the real world, it's very simple. Either I have it hanging on my wall or I don't. It's not like two people can have the same artwork hanging around in their house. But in a digital world you can, and the question is, okay, no, you cannot stop people from misusing it, but that's always the case with digital artwork or digital creations. You cannot prevent people from like stealing your data. But you can make it easier for people that want to play by the rules to do that in a trustless manner. You don't have to trust this other person to actually for example, if you do an atomic transaction, you don't have to trust people to pay you the money. You don't need an entity between you and this other party to do transactions, basically. So yeah, like having no middleman between honest parties. That's the interesting thing. And even dishonest parties could not like do a proper transaction. They could just steal your work, but that's not going to be solved by blockchain. So you're right. It's hard to figure out what, or it's important to figure out what NFTs can provide and what they can't. There is also the concept of using NFTs to actually get into some kind of. You could get into a party if you own one. You can get into some kind of forum if you have one. You have like using it not just for the rights that you're gaining from it, but actually the token itself as something to prove things with. And that's like the next step. It's not just like claiming rights in a different way, but also like having other utility that is connected to the token. So maybe it's still a little bit unclear of what to do with it, but I think there's going to be a lot of experimentation on that.
So one thing I was wondering about, so since data is of course copyable, what's to prevent me from creating a new NFT that has all the same data as an existing NFT, but I just change the license to something that suits me better?
Nothing.
But then this still points to the ownership of that object, it still points to the creator, to everything, but I say, well, here I have a token that says I have a much better license.
Yes, the idea is to make it very easy to verify that this token was created by the actual owner or the actual owner of the copyright or the creator. So that was the last piece I was talking about. So having some kind of identity concept connected to the NFT to actually prove, okay, this is the real creator and this is the fake creator. If you make it very simple to recognize that, you can still create fakes. And you can still reference to everything you want, but if you make it very simple for people to say, okay, but this is a fake, then at least that is something you can work around. It's not going to prevent you from doing it, but that's also the same with the digital world as it is right now. Nobody prevents you from copying a website and pretending to be the motor world and offering a different service.
But so it's not actually possible to copy the So when you create this token, it's not then possible to just copy the ID of
no,
the original
no,
creator?
that's a cryptographic signature that is not copyable.
Oh, right.
So your implementation of one NFT showed links to 2 licenses, one on the IPFS, one hosted on a internet server. So I assume they are identical when I buy the NFT, but what happens if someone changes the immutable web server copy?
Yeah, that's why
it.
you have the hash of the data in the NFT itself as well. So you can just say, okay, does it point to the right thing? And if not, you just ignore that. It's the same for the license. The license also has the hash in the NFT.
With regard to object permanence, I saw that you said that you could only add URLs, but you couldn't remove them. What stops someone from adding so many that the NFT runs out of space?
The space is very limited, and it's getting very expensive if you add things to the blockchain. So it's kind of a yes, you can probably break NFTs by adding so many URLs that it like just blows up. But it's way easier to destroy things on a blockchain. You just send it to an address that doesn't exist and it's gone. So for the ecosystem itself, you don't care what people do. It's a permissionless system. For the creator, yes, that's you can break things for this particular NFT, but there are also way simpler ways to break things. So I guess that's what people do, and you kind of have to accept it.
Maybe that's a related question. I didn't understand why making the data permanent is important if you can just store the hash, the ID, and share it in the blockchain. Is this related, or is it just 2 different things?
No, the hash doesn't help you to actually look at what you bought or what you own, what you get access to, because I mean people are dying every day, so digital artists might also not be around while the NFT still exists. So they might not have a copy of the NFT left, and you don't have one, and nobody else has. Or if there is somebody in the world who has the data, you kind of have to find them. And the URL is a reference to somebody who stores this data. So you need some kind of way for people to look at the NFT and say, okay, where is the data? What is it pointing to? The hash just allows you to verify it, but the hash itself you cannot recreate the data from the hash. You need some kind of pointer to where the data is, otherwise you're not going to find it.
Thank you for the very insightful talk. You talked a lot about the longevity of NFTs. So what happens when the cryptographic methods underlying the blockchain eventually turn out to be weak? Is there some kind of corrective mechanism involved or built into the blockchain, or
blockchains can be evolving, so they can change their hash algorithm in the future. They can have to change their cryptographic primitives. It's gonna change the rules, and with permissionless systems, it's always the case that you have to have some kind of consensus inside the network to actually change the rules. But if you have this consensus, for example, because quantum computers just break SHA-256, which is like a very hash function that is often used. If it's broken, then people will just fix it. So yes, blockchains can be upgraded in this regard.
I have one more question. If I got you right, you mentioned that in an ideal world, or in your ideal world, you could use that kind of technology to cut out middlemen and directly have a relation between the creator and the one who bought it. Now my question is, in that ideal world, how does Mint Garden as a marketplace then make money?
Because it makes things easier. We say that it's rather complicated. What has to get into an NFT to actually make it work properly. So, for example, helping artists to create NFTs, even if they sell it directly, there's still the capability of providing a service to make that way easier. There's also still you could say maybe it's easier to find people that want to buy your NFT without like going into the effort of finding these people yourself. Maybe you want to use a marketplace, maybe you want to use a central entity, but it doesn't have to be required for it to work. So yes, but that is actually an interesting point, that having like no middleman required means that building a middleman platform is something that might not be as lucrative as in other ecosystems.
Okay, so the last question will come from Slack in order to illustrate that there are really people out there watching and having good questions. Compared to real-world art, once posted somewhere, everybody can still look, enjoy, print out your art after an NFT of it was sold. Okay, I have no idea. So do we only talk about commercial usage rights in terms of benefits?
Not just. Some people want to brag with owning things. That's how people are. I think we can acknowledge that owning a limited edition Ferrari is better than owning the same thing without the limited edition printed on it. So, I mean, that's one thing. You can also show, like, I supported this artist, I supported this creation by buying an NFT, and I got something from it. So that is like the one thing. The other thing is that yes, commercial use is actually a pretty interesting use case. But yeah, so that's basically the two facets. Also, if you add utility to the token to actually allow you to do something only if you own that token and not just grant you some rights, then it's going to change the equation yet again.
Okay, there are some more questions here I could see. I suggest, Andy, you will be around here the whole day. For sure after lunch, because there will be another talk about the Chia ecosystem.
Matt is talking here, and I'm going to do the track managing, so feel free to join.
Yeah, so please feel free to ask all your questions to him. That's absolutely okay. Thank you again very much for this talk.